Hey guys, Elijah Williams with Williams Built Blades here, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about knives. Surprise there. Scandi grinds, flat grinds, hollow grinds. What do you need to carry? The short answer is it depends on what you're trying to do with the knife, and it depends on what you like. As you're probably aware of if you're into bushcraft or survival stuff at all, the Scandi grind knife blade design has become extremely popular in this arena of things in the last 5 to 10 years. I think there's several reasons for it. One, people like you and people like me really appreciate sort of traditional or nostalgic type things. The Scandi grind harkens back to, an older culture, the Scandinavian, obviously, peoples, and that's the design of knife that they particularly used. So when it comes to bushcraft and that kind of thing, I think there's an element of the nostalgic feel, and people want that. Another part of it is it's been, well, everybody knows about Moores, right? With the last name that's hard to pronounce. He was a popular bushcraft skills instructor for about 40 years, and he had a lot to do with popularizing the Scandi grind knife blade as well. Now there's all kinds of different Scandi grind knife blades in the market. It's not hard to find them, whether you're going for a hand-made knife or a semi-production knife. There's a lot of different brands. Do you want a Scandi grind knife? That's the question. When it comes to bushcraft, theoretically, a lot of what we do in bushcraft and wilderness survival, we're working with wood, and not building cabinets and that kind of thing, but wood in its natural form out in the wilderness and that kind of thing. The Scandi grind knife blade is particularly suited to carving wood. It's like using a chisel, only obviously the direction's different and that kind of thing. It's kind of hard to explain if you haven't actually used one, but it's physics and a little bit of magic, maybe. It just does well. But here's the main reason. The reason a knife cuts well is because it's thin. And I'm talking about the actual edge. That's the whole point of sharpening a knife, is to get it as thin as absolutely possible. Obviously, you can't continue to that, otherwise you have nothing behind the edge and it completely falls apart. You're basically trying to find the happy medium between thinness and strength. So what the Scandi grind does is it brings the actual edge down very thin, and then obviously the blade widens out as that angle travels up towards the main part of the blade. So I have here a little bushcraft blade that I make. I'm making a Scandi grind knife blade that has a deeper Scandi grind to it. This actually goes this far up. That's where the grind ends. The grind itself is higher and more gradual of a wedge than your average Scandi grind. So as it comes down to the final edge, instead of going completely to 0 degrees, which is what a normal Scandi grind does, I leave a very, very thin edge, but not a completely sharp edge. And then I come in and I do a very small micro bevel. It's probably about 5 thousandths wide on the actual very edge, and there's no way you can see that in the camera from where I'm standing. So before I put that micro bevel on, if you look at the very edge of the knife blade, you can see light, a line of shininess all the way around, which that's an indication there's not a sharp edge there. When I come in on a very fine stone and just put a very small secondary bevel onto that blade, this is going to give that edge more strength than a normal Scandi grind, but maintain that chisel-like blade profile that makes it work very well for wood carving and that kind of thing. So I don't know if my camera will focus, but that's what the Scandi grind blade looks like that I'm producing, and it's new for 2017. You see a lot of knives out there today that are handmade. A lot of times you can tell by the price on them that if they are handmade, they're not handmade in the US, which obviously mine are. Back to the question, what do I want or what do you want? It depends on what you're going to be doing. And if you've ever tried to take a piece of wood, say like a stick about that big around, preferably a seasoned one, and hold it on end and slice little thin leaves or pieces of wood, of fiber, off of that piece of wood against the grain. You can try a variety of different knives, and you know, using a Scandi grind blade, you can kind of tell, you can feel the difference. So that's kind of a neat little test that I like to do on a blade. Scandi grinds work well for carving wood. They do everything else. One of the drawbacks that they have for everything else is that they've got, most of the time, they've got that real significantly more obtuse angle to the edge, and then the rest of the thickness of the blade. So when you're cutting through, you know, if you're food prep or anything like that, you know, you're fighting against that extra thickness of the blade instead of a nice gradual thin flat grind, for example. If I had to pick one knife, it probably wouldn't be a Scandi grind, just because it works very well for some specific purposes, but it just doesn't have the same kind of strength at that edge that your normal flat grind knife is going to have. I didn't come up with this. There's other knife makers that do this, but a more gradual Scandi grind or deeper Scandi grind, and then a very small secondary bevel. So I feel like you get the best of both worlds in that case. So it's starting to snow, which is kind of a good thing, because it's been about 5 degrees for about a week, and maybe up to 20 during the day. So it finally warmed up, and now we're going to get a bunch of snow. But this is it's a winter in north central Idaho. So appreciate you guys watching, and if you haven't subscribed, I would appreciate that as well. And as always, if you have any questions about knives, even if they're not my knives, go ahead and leave a comment or contact me, and I'd be happy to help you out. Thanks for watching.